style cookies that are soft and chewy in the center, slightly crisp around the edges, and so easy to make. I know you guys are gonna love the recipe, so we're gonna get right into the recipe first, and then after that I'm gonna answer some of the commonly asked questions that I know you guys are probably gonna be thinking while watching the recipe, like can you substitute gluten-free flour, or what kind of vegan butter is best for baking, or can you freeze the dough, and if so, how? And how do you keep the cookies soft after baking them? I'm gonna answer all those questions at the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned until the end. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed so you never miss a future recipe, and let's get started. I'm going to start by preheating my oven to 375 degrees. I like to do this first so it has plenty of time to actually heat up. Then I'm going to make a flax egg just with some ground flax seeds and water. I'm going to mix this together and it'll go from a liquid consistency to kind of a gel, and that's when it is perfect and ready to use. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and mix together my dry ingredients. I like to fluff up my flour so that it's nice and loose and not too compact, and then spoon it into my measuring cup. It takes like 3 extra seconds, but it seriously makes perfect cookies every time because you're getting a more accurate measurement. And I'm going to add that to a bowl along with some baking powder and baking soda. And you don't have to sift it in, but mine tends to get little clumps, so I find that to be really easy. And then I'm going to add some salt. The salt really brings out the flavor. It adds nice buttery notes. It kind of contrasts the sweetness. It's a super important ingredient in cookies, so don't skip it. Then I'm going to whisk all that together and add my oats. Now I'm going to use old-fashioned oats, the good old-fashioned kind, and I'm just going to pop them into a blender to roughly chop them. So I'm not necessarily making oat flour. It's not quite that fine. This is in real time. I haven't sped anything up, so you can see I do it just really quickly, and I'm going to have some pieces that are still left whole, but most of them are just going to be kind of coarsely chopped and really just evenly dispersed throughout the cookies. The oats are going to give a nice subtle kind of sweetness and nuttiness. It works so well with the brown sugar and the vegan butter. It's just a delicious way to add lots of layers and complexity to the flavor of the cookie. For the wet ingredients, I'm going to take some softened butter. You want to make sure it's softened and not melted. That's how we're going to make sure we have nice soft cookies. Then I'm going to add cane sugar and brown sugar. And if you're anything like me, you may have seen a cookie recipe in the past and it calls for half and half, like half cane sugar, half brown sugar. And you might have thought, whatever, I'm just going to skip the brown sugar and just use cane sugar because I already have that one open. But honestly, the brown sugar is a really important ingredient here. It's kind of what makes a chocolate chip cookie taste like a chocolate chip cookie and not just a sugar cookie with chocolate chips in it. So add that in, mix it to light and fluffy. Then we're going to add the vanilla, the flax egg, and applesauce. The applesauce isn't going to make the cookies taste like apples at all, but it's just going to help kind of work in 2 ways. One, it's going to act as an oil replacer so we can use slightly less butter. And 2, it's going to help to bind the cookies together because again, we're not using chicken's eggs. Now this is where you really want to go crazy and whip, whip, whip. You want to do this for about a minute because you want this to be as light and fluffy as possible. This is again going to create a beautiful texture in the cookies, and it's one of the things that makes a bakery style cookie a bakery style cookie. It's all about mixing at that stage. Then I'm going to add the dry ingredients, and at this stage I'm just mixing to combine. So I do half the flour, I stir that in, and then I add the remaining flour and I just mix until there's no more visible flour in the bowl. At that point I can add my chocolate chips and my freeze-dried strawberries, and if you've never seen freeze-dried strawberries, they're a little bit different than other kinds of dried fruit. They're not like soft and sticky and chewy. They're kind of dry and crunchy and powdery and really cool and great for baked goods. And they come sliced usually, so I like to just roughly chop them. You don't have to make them too small because as you stir them into the cookie dough, they'll break up a little bit more. I like to just kind of roughly chop and then add to the bowl along with the chocolate chips. Then I'm going to add my chopped walnuts, and this again is one of those delicious combinations because we've got the brown sugar, the butter, the sea salt, the walnuts. It's just so tasty together. And this is what the dough looks like when it's all mixed together. I think it's really pretty with the little flecks of strawberry all throughout. And I like to use a medium-sized ice cream scoop to perfectly portion out the dough, and that way all the cookies look the same and they bake at the same time. If you want a thinner, slightly chewier cookie, you can press down about 1/3 of the way. You don't have to press all the way down because they will spread out a little bit when they cook. And I like to go ahead and add some chocolate chips on top for decoration, but it's totally optional. And for a softer, thicker cookie, just don't press them down. Now these are going to go in the oven for 11 minutes. It's exactly 11 minutes in my oven, but 10 to 12 minutes is a good range. I like to underbake them a little bit and then let them finish cooking outside of the oven. So in the recipe, you're going to see bake for 11 minutes and then let rest on the cookie sheet without lifting them up or anything. Just let them chill out on the cookie sheet for 5 minutes. And I know that's gonna seem really annoying because you're just gonna wanna eat the cookies right away, but actually the cookies aren't fully done baking. But what we wanna make sure is that they stay nice and soft. So we're pulling them out at 11 minutes, and that residual heat from the oven is going to continue baking the cookies outside of the oven. And the time on the cookie sheet for that just 5 minutes, it's not so long, I promise, they're going to set up and really help to create the perfect structure of the cookie. This is where you get a lot of those really important texture elements that makes this like a bakery style cookie. I think the thinner version of these cookies is really good because the center stays really nice and soft, and then the outside just gets this nice chew. So these aren't like hard, crunchy cookies. They're not like Tate's cookies. This thinner version reminds me a lot of the bakery grocery store cookies, like the ones that we would get from the bakery section at the grocery store as a kid. And they just have that almost like a Subway cookie kind of texture. I say as a kid because they would give us a free cookie at the grocery store when I was a kid. I don't know, just brings back lots of memories. But the thicker one is also so good too, and it stays really soft in the center. It's almost like cookie dough in the center, and then it's encapsulated by this slightly crispy cookie shell, if that makes sense. Both are great. When I tell you I worked very hard on this cookie recipe, I'll show you, like, you know that how it started, how it's going thing? How it started? But how it's going is insane. Like, I really wanted to make sure that all the flavors blend together really nicely and that you get the effect of having something that tastes really buttery and rich and has like layered flavor. It really is like a chocolate covered strawberry meets a chocolate chip cookie. Serious heaven. I know you guys are gonna love these cookies, and I can't wait for you to try them. You might have been wondering if you can use fresh strawberries instead of the freeze-dried strawberries, and the answer is actually not really, because the fresh strawberries obviously are fresh. They've got lots of sweet strawberry juices, which are delicious, but what happens when you put those strawberries in the oven is that they release all those juices into the cookies, and it just makes it kind of soggy. And actually, it's not as flavorful as it seems like it would be. I feel like in my mind, I always think fresh is just gonna be the most flavorful and the most delicious, but freeze-dried strawberries have such a strong concentrated strawberry flavor, especially when added to baked goods, because they're dehydrated and their flavor is naturally concentrated in the process. So you really get a beautiful burst of strawberry flavor in the cookie when you use the freeze-dried strawberries, but it's not going to impart the extra moisture. So if you have the option, definitely go for freeze-dried. If you don't have freeze-dried on hand or don't want to use them, you could substitute a different kind of dried fruit, something nice and tart and tangy like dried cranberries or dried cherries would be good, or just skip it altogether. It's a really good cookie just with the chocolate and the walnuts, and honestly, it's still good without it. So you can kind of pick and choose which way you want to go, just don't do fresh. Some of you might be wondering if you can use gluten-free flour instead of the all-purpose flour, and the answer is yes. You just want to make sure that you opt for an all-purpose gluten-free flour. So you wouldn't want to use something like 100% coconut flour or 100% almond flour. You want to use a blend that says all-purpose, like the Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 is a really great option for this. When choosing a vegan butter for baking, I recommend the sticks instead of the kind in the tub. They have a different water ratio and they melt differently, and so I really recommend going for either the Earth Balance sticks, the Miyokos is really good, or Country Crock makes buttery sticks as well. And you do want to make sure that you go for salted butter, not unsalted butter, because that's how this recipe was tested. This is a freezer-friendly recipe, so you have two different options if you want to freeze these cookies. The first is to freeze the dough, and what I do is I scoop out the cookie dough onto a cookie sheet. You don't have to spread them out on the cookie sheet because you're not going to be baking them, and just pop that whole cookie sheet into the freezer and make sure that the cookie dough freezes completely. So I usually do this for a couple of hours. Once they are frozen and totally hard, you can put them in an airtight container or freezer bag, and they'll be good for about 6 months, and you can just go ahead and individually place and bake whenever you want, which means you can have a single freshly baked cookie every night of the week if you want, which is a really fun thing to do. I also find it really cozy to kind of always have a batch of ready to bake cookie dough in my freezer. That way, if I ever have friends coming over and I don't really have anything planned for a dessert, I can just very easily pop the cookie dough into the oven, and in a couple of minutes we have freshly baked cookies. It feels very fancy for your guests. They're like, wow, homemade cookies. It seems so easy, but it really is super simple, and it's just a nice homey thing to have on hand whenever you need it. When When you're baking from frozen though, you want to add 2 extra minutes to the cooking time. You can also freeze these cookies once they're baked, and that way you can just kind of pop them in the microwave for a couple seconds to bring them back to life, and again, you have cookies whenever you want. It's super quick and easy, and it's a great way to make sure that you don't waste any cookies. Like if you feel like you made too much and you're not going to eat them all, you can pop the leftovers in the freezer and just heat them up individually as you like, and they'll stay nice and fresh and nothing will go to waste. These cookies do stay pretty soft on their own if you put them in an airtight bag, and that's because of the strawberries. So the strawberries kind of rehydrate just slightly, like just enough to keep the cookie nice and moist without making it soggy. So they kind of don't need any help in terms of staying soft, but if you really want to make sure that they are perfectly like super tender, you can put a piece of sandwich bread in the container with the leftover cookies, and that will keep it nice and soft for 3 to 5 days on the counter. I really hope you enjoy this recipe. If you recreate it, I definitely want to see a picture, so tag me on Instagram at nikkivegan. If you have any questions at all, feel free to let me know in the comments below or on my blog. The full recipe is going to be in the description box below, and like I said, I really hope you love these cookies. And I think they'd make a really good Valentine's Day present too if you're kind of on the fence about what to get someone in your life. These are perfect. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a video very soon. Bye!